Hello everybody and welcome to Rest and Reason. I'm RP the Red Panda, and today we're going to be looking at another what board games to buy. Today I'm looking specifically at the 5 board games I would recommend buying in the social deduction and political negotiation group. The reason I group these two together is because both of them are actually in the same family, I would say. Both games run off of the core of having 2 teams at the very least. Those teams are made up of roles, and those roles do various things, and sometimes even those roles win in various different ways. They might compete against each other a little, they might not. The simplest version of this, of political negotiation, is social deduction, where there is one team versus another, and the whole goal is for this team, the big team, to find those few people who aren't on their team. The most complicated versions of this can have the teams changing from round to round, can have things shifting constantly, and people changing loyalties constantly. But in the end, they all have the same core of roles, and those roles somewhat determining what people want to do and have to do to win, but they have to do it together by political negotiation. Conversations where you have to say, I need what's best for me. You're not trying to do a one-for-one nice transaction where both sides benefit. You want to get the better deal of every single political negotiation thing that happens. Unlike an economic negotiation, which I'll talk about in the future, hopefully. Let's go ahead and get into our first game, which is One Night Werewolf. One Night Werewolf is one of those games that I've watched people just enjoy to the fullest because it is one turn, really, with 30 minutes of people just going, he's the werewolf. No, I'm not the werewolf. That person over there was rustling last night. Well, I technically was the drunkard, and I looked up and I saw that that person was the werewolf. You're not the drunkard. I'm the drunkard. That is exactly how these conversations go. A bunch of people saying things that nobody can prove, and that really everybody could be lying. Every single person could be lying in the game. And ultimately, One Night Werewolf takes this down to its most basic form of who is or who are the werewolves. One Night Werewolf is best with a large group of people that you just want to have fast, crazy interactions where the literal only thing that you can go off of is pointing at each other and yelling. The next level up from One Night Werewolf, I believe, not level up as in better, but level up in difficulty and complexity, would be Mafia. Now, many people will go, RP, there are so much better ones out there now than Mafia. And to that I would say, Mafia is free. Mafia requires only a 54 card deck. Mafia has hundreds of roles to choose from. Ones that you can go out and find and say, hey, that sounds like fun. Or, oh, that doesn't sound fun, scroll past. So you can customize the game to your group. For example, I was doing this with middle schoolers at one point, and we did My Little Pony. If I was going to do this with my wife, I might play a Simpsons version. And what I love the most about Mafia is that it really brings out the awesomeness of the story, because people have to make up great stories for Mafia to be fun. The best games of Mafia is where you have the person who says, go to sleep and all of that, tell amazing stories of how people lived and died. So I would say that the big difference between One Night Werewolf and Mafia is if you don't have a good storyteller in your board game group, don't play Mafia. But if you have somebody who's kind of a dungeon master, kind of a storyteller personality, put them as the Mafia storyteller and you will always have a fun time with Mafia. The next level up from both of these, in again complexity and in differentiation from being pure social deduction to the more difficult political negotiation, is Deal or Death. Deal or Death has 3 teams, actually. You have 2 executives who want to get these 2 shareholders on their team. And you have an anarchist who wants the shareholders to go 1 to each, or to just go to nobody. So Finally, you have the shareholders who just want to be on the winning side. If this one's the winner on that one, if this one's the winner, that one. They want to be together and they want to be on the winning side. This game also adds a few other roles that I didn't talk about and a piece of information about the shareholders where they get a special title if they beat the other shareholders at having the most stuff that they get from being on the right team. So ultimately, the game really encourages heavier political negotiation than the other two games. Now, for all three of these first games, I want to make something very clear. I would not recommend playing these games with anything less than 7 players. I don't think Mafia, One Night Werewolf, or Deal or Death are really excellent games unless you play with 7 or more players, because they are very simple games. That's not a bad thing, but their main goal is to have you look up and interact with each other. And if you don't have at least 7 people, there's not enough energy, there's not enough different personality, there's not enough stuff to make that explosion of excitement and fun that you should be getting from these games. So make sure before you buy any of these that you have 7 people, and especially with these beginning ones, picture the experience. Picture what your game group is going to want. Those are all beginner social deduction / political negotiation games. The next one I'm going to talk about is an intermediate level one. It is a Game of Thrones board game. Now, I am talking about this in lieu of diplomacy. I would say that you could also play diplomacy instead of a Game of Thrones board game. I recommend this one because it adds a little bit more game to it. It also has a more definitive end time that is a little easier to reach, instead of everybody has to die and you have to be the last one left, which means the game goes quicker. And finally, it takes the order system that in diplomacy would make it a maybe even advanced level board game, and makes it simpler by having tokens that are very easy to use to make orders happen. So this game is an area control political negotiation game. And that's what's important about everything above a beginner political negotiation game. Beginner political negotiation games focus only on the political negotiation. So there really isn't going to be much else than everybody talking and doing that. In a Game of Thrones board game, you have actual armies, you have actual territory, you might even have more power than the other person, and therefore be able to throw around your weight a little bit more in negotiations. There's a little bit more to the negotiations, but that also means it's more complicated and less lighthearted. So I would highly encourage that if you have 5 or 6 players, or 7 if you get the expansion, a Game of Thrones board game or even diplomacy is an amazing experience for a bunch of people who love an area control game where you're just constantly trying to figure out who can you work with, how can you work with them to get the ultimate goal of victory, but maybe even just to get the ultimate goal of surviving to the end of the game. Finally, we're going to talk about an advanced version of political negotiation in 44 BCE. In 44 BCE, you start off with an engine building component where you are building an engine by putting down these people to get yourself more cubes. In this case, whatever cube you want. If you put here, now you get whatever cube you want in a red cube, and you just continue to build up bonuses and build up a stronger faction throughout the game. In addition to the engine building, you have resource and card management, because you have to use these resources to do what you do in the negotiation round, but you also need these resources to buy these cards. And you can only have 7 total cards and resources in your hand at the end of the buying round. 7. That is not very many in your hand. So you have to be very, very careful how you manage your hand, how you manage your resources. Finally, in political negotiation, you have 2 teams. You have the Imperium Maius, which is the big cheese. That's what I'm going to call him from now on. He's the guy everybody else is fighting. And so everybody else wants to dethrone him in these 3 areas. If they do it in 2, they win and he loses that tile. So he's going to play down cards, and then he's going to support himself. His game is pretty simple. But let's say that this was his opponent. He doesn't have this. Now, they can still play this card. But somebody else on their board is going to have to put on this lion symbol underneath here a yellow cube. And if they don't do that, this guy will not get this power. This will not happen. And all of his plans won't work. And the reason they might not do that, the reason why they might not help you, is because if they help you, you might win special bonuses. You might win this tile. So they might decide they don't want to. Just like I did with the beginner board games, I want to make a real quick note about these more complicated ones, A Game of Thrones and 44 BCE. Both of these games reward loyalty a little bit more than the original 3 games that I talked about. The beginner board games don't reward loyalty really at all. Your goal is to lie, cheat, steal, and do as much as humanly possible to ruin the other people's gain for your own benefit. And if that sounds appealing to you, then those games are going to be the ones you want to choose. But if you have a group that's maybe a little bit less cutthroat but likes to be cutthroat, then the more complicated ones are probably your best bet. A Game of Thrones board game and Diplomacy punish you for being disloyal by the fact that in later games, people are going to go, okay, if I make a deal with him, he usually breaks them with me, so I'm going to be less likely to make a deal with them. 44 BC also incentivizes loyalty by giving loyalty cards. Loyalty cards are another form of currency, and you need this currency to do some of the coolest actions in this game. So it also helps you so you don't need other people to be loyal to you later. So if you're loyal to somebody else and they backstab you, you get this card and it will help you beat them later without any help from them. Whereas in One Night Werewolf, that might not be the case. You might be the werewolf one time and have to lie through your teeth for obvious reasons. If you don't lie, you will lose. But next time, if you're not the werewolf, you might tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And then maybe you get bored of telling the truth and you decide to lie just for the fun of it. I've seen that all happen in the easier games. This genre is very unique. Its focus is on people interacting with each other. And so these games are very hard to put points on. They're very hard to put recliners on, because honestly, what you should assess these games by is, can I picture my group playing this? Can I picture all of us accusing each other randomly in One Night Werewolf? Can I picture us playing that story of Mafia in the Simpsons universe? Can I picture us all being corporate people trying to get that little bit of extra stuff in the rat race? Can I picture us carving up the world in Diplomacy or Westeros in Game of Thrones? Can I picture me being that very precise, calculating Roman to just barely squeeze out the victory and become the next Caesar Augustus? Each of these games has something that's strong if you have the group for it. And if you don't buy it. Go watch the playthrough first, figure out if you have the group, then buy these games. Please let me know down in the comments, what games did I miss? What games would you say should switch in for other ones? Do you think there's a better one than any of the ones I mentioned? And why do you think that game is better? I'd love to hear down in the comments and have that conversation with you guys. And as always, please hit that subscribe button. What I love about this channel is that it does what these board games do. Instead of just staring at my own thing, doing my editing and doing my videos, I get to look up and read you guys' comments, and it has been a joy. You guys have been really respectful in your disagreement, really kind in your agreement lately. It's been a real pleasure to interact with you guys, and I'm looking forward to more and more people commenting and liking, and I'd really like to encourage you guys to comment on each other's comments. Let's have a discussion right here on YouTube that's respectful and kind, where we're actually thinking through board games together as a community, which will make us all better off. And as always, thank you so much for joining us today on Rest and Reason.